Well, hey guys. So I have a different type of fly tying video today. It's actually more of a comparison with materials. I just got this stuff. Actually, I've had it for a little while, and it's the Faux Bucktail. It's made by Fish Skull, and it's supposed to mimic bucktail. You can tell it does have some kind of waviness to it. See if we can get it to focus. So it does have a little bit of waviness, kind of like bucktail does, not quite as wavy. Bucktail's a little more wavy. And it does have some different types of properties. Obviously, it's got a little more kind of shininess to it. Bucktail is a bit more matte. It's also, I'm finding, a little more stiff. Now, at this length, there's a lot of movement to it. Definitely a lot of action. I mean, it looks wonderful, especially when it's moving like this. It looks like it would be amazing. But I do find that there's definitely a little more, and this almost looks stiffer. But when you get in the water, bucktail tends to soften up and start moving quite a bit. This does not, and this stays a little more stiff. Is that a bad thing? Maybe, maybe not. What it really kind of reminds me of is the little fibbits, you know, that you use for the tails of like mayflies and whatnot. It looks like giant fibbits, and that's kind of what it looks like to me. And it's definitely tapered. You can tell there's a taper at the end. But one thing that I notice, I think, that makes the biggest difference between this is hollow. The fibers, when you tie it in, especially when you get more towards the bottom here, they can collapse. And when you tie it in tight, it will flare out. Now, that might be a look you're going for. Maybe it's not. If it's not what you're going for, this might be a little easier for you, especially if you have a heavy hand when tying. This will not flare on you. It'll stay solid. And you will see in a second, I've got a video tying a Clouser Minnow with both of these. Here we go. I just put it in the water, so it's a little wet. I was testing out how it looks in the water. And here's my bucktail one, okay, the Clouser Minnow. You shake the Clouser Minnow, there's really not a lot of movement. It almost looks like it would be more stiff, and there's definitely more with that. But when you stick it in the water, things change. I don't know what it is, but there's definitely a little more movement with this. Okay, is that what you're going for? Maybe, and if so, then definitely stick with bucktail. If you're going for something a little more stiff, and there are some applications where stiff is good, in fact, for a Clouser Minnow, I kind of like that stiffness. You know, I really do like it, and you can tell this comes out a little straighter, a little more kind of neater of a fly versus the bucktail. There's definitely a little more waviness, and it's harder to control, so it ends up coming out a little different looking. But they are similar, I will say. There's some definite properties of it that are similar, but there's also properties that are different. And the other thing I will say is a lot of people I see online, they talk about with this new stuff that you can get a lot more colors with it. So it's, you know, more able to get some really cool colors. There's chartreuse, there's black, there's blue. Here's an olive, which I just used for this one. And I would say it's pretty vibrant, but I've got a bunch of different colors of bucktail here, and these look pretty vibrant. I mean, in comparison, you know, so I don't know if that's necessarily a selling point to me. But what I will say that is a selling point is the ease of use. I definitely think this is going to be easier to use. You just pull out a little bit, you know, make sure your tips are aligned properly when you do, and then you just simply snip it off. The other thing that I noticed that is definitely a selling point to me is the length of fibers. This is a high-grade bucktail here. This bucktail here is by Hairline, and it's a high-end bucktail, and it's got relatively long fibers. I've seen some that are a little longer than this. You know, I guess if you come up here, you've got pretty long. That's probably the longest point, but still, we're talking quite a bit longer with the faux bucktail. If you're tying like pike flies, if it gets longer like this, there's definitely going to be movement in the water for sure. There are times where you do want stiffer. What comes to mind for me is there's a few patterns where you put bucktail down below something, basically to keep it from fouling up on the hook. If you have a soft fiber like marabou or something that you want to put down, for a lot of movement, but you don't want it to wrap around the bottom of the hook, this could be really good, I think, because it's definitely stiffer. You can see there's a waviness here too, and I'm not sure what that was. I stuck it back in the bag and it must not have come in perfectly, and it got this waviness, so that's something to think about too. If you don't put it back in perfectly, it could get a little bit of a waviness, which might be a bad thing. Okay, so keep that in mind. It will hold its shape, especially if it gets warm. You want to keep this, in cool temperatures, or it could, I think it's like a type of, I wouldn't say plastic, but it definitely, I'm pretty sure this can melt. Get this to melt. Yeah, see? I mean, of course, that's a high heat, that's a flame, but that was instant and started melting. Okay? Same thing's going to happen if you put it in a hot area. It could end up melting, or it could end up bending, kind of like this one did, and it got like that wave to it. Let's get tying it, and you can see how it works. And at the end of the video, I'll show underwater footage of both the faux bucktail and the real bucktail to see how it moves underwater. Okay, so the hook I'm using is a Gamakatsu SS15, and it's in size 2. And the thread is Danville's 210 flat waxed in white. As always, build a small thread base to place the dumbbell eye on. Then attach the dumbbell eye to your hook with X-wraps and under wraps. This is a lead painted dumbbell in the medium size. Select a few strands of faux bucktail and make sure the tips are aligned. Then snip off at the base. Now measure out your material until you can see a bit of wiggle. And then tie in at that point, just right behind the eye of the hook. Then you want to span the space to behind the dumbbell and spiral the thread down the hook shank. And now back up the hook shank. Pull back the fiber and snip off the waist as close as you can. If a few fibers are hanging over the eye of the hook, then snip them off. Now, measure out the top color to the same length and tie it in just at the tip. So I want to show you guys one thing about this faux bucktail that could be a concern. I am making quite a few very tight wraps to hold the material in place. But if you look, with a little pressure, even with those really tight wraps, you can pull the material out. Alright, so let's redo that. Now that that's in place, whip finish your fly. Then cement the head before doing anything else to ensure the fibers don't pull out. Then separate the fibers so they're even on both sides of the hook. And your fly is finished. This is a fairly long streamer, and it needs to be when using this material. Okay, so let's try the real bucktail version. I'm using a lesser quality hook and eye, just because I don't want to waste them. I'm going to move through this quickly and save some time on the already long video. But I want to show you guys how much more work is involved with properly cutting bucktail. You must pull out the underfur, and then pinch the tip to pull out the shorter fibers. Alright, so now it's ready. As you can see, the Faux Bucktail version is very stiff, but it does have some nice darting action. You can see that there is a little bend, but it returns very quickly to straight. So now for the real bucktail version. You can already tell there is more movement. I don't think it's an exact faux bucktail. I think it's kind of its own thing. I think you can use it like bucktail in many ways, but I think there's definite advantages to bucktail, and there's some advantages to the synthetic faux bucktail. I'd rather see it called something other than faux bucktail personally, because I just think that there are properties of it that are so different that I think it's more kind of its own material. Great material. I do like it. I'm not knocking it. I think this is good stuff. I definitely will use it. In fact, I like it better for Clousers, and the reason why is easier to use. You get a neater looking Clouser, get more of a darting type Clouser because it is a little more stiff. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. If you like this sort of thing, please subscribe. Check the description section for a list of materials I used on this fly. I will see you on the next video. Now you go catch some fish.